Let's dive into this. We're looking at the sources you shared, focusing on a really tough case from 2012, the unsolved death of Jenny Atkinson near Mantua, Utah.
Right.
And our goal today really is to unpack what the sources present, the facts, the timeline, the challenges, and try to get a handle on the questions that are still just hanging there, over a decade later.
Yeah, and it's clear right from the get-go in the materials how incredibly difficult this case was.
Yeah.
I mean, the condition her remains were found in, plus the specific circumstances around the discovery, it created huge problems for investigators immediately.
Absolutely. And it's so important as we talk about this to remember this isn't just like a case file. It's a real human story, a tragedy that's still deeply affecting a family who are just desperate for answers, for some kind of resolution after all this time.
Definitely.
So maybe let's start by just laying out the basic facts. What do the sources tell us? Who are we talking about? What's the core timeline?
Okay, so the person at the center is Jenny Atkinson, born June 10th, 1981. The sources say she was last definitively seen on July 17th, 2012. That was in Brigham City, Utah. But what's kind of striking early on is that she wasn't officially reported missing until 6 days later, on July 23rd.
That almost week-long gap right there between when she was last seen and when the report went in? That's one of those initial question marks the sources really highlight, isn't it? A whole period where her whereabouts are just unknown.
Totally unknown. And then, tragically, her body was discovered later on.
When was that?
It was about 3 weeks after that last sighting, actually.
Yeah.
August 10th, 2012. And the discovery was made near the Dock Flat Campground in Mantua.
Okay.
Identification was tough, because of the decomposition. But there was one crucial identifier they found. A tattoo on her shoulder. Praying hands with the name Jace Anthony.
Jace Anthony. That's her son's name, right? The sources mentioned that.
Yes, exactly. Her son.
So what about the official findings? Cause of death?
Well, this is where it gets really complicated. The official cause of death was listed as undetermined.
Undetermined. Why?
The sources are explicit.
Right.
It was because of the advanced state of decomposition.
Yeah.
Her body had been exposed to the elements for some time.
Right.
But here's the thing. Despite that undetermined cause, the case is officially classified as an unsolved homicide.
Yeah.
That's by the Box Elder County Sheriff's Office. The case number, for reference, is 12002648.
Okay, so right away, you've got this fundamental conflict, or maybe ambiguity is the word. It's an unsolved homicide, officially. But the actual how or why, medically speaking, couldn't be pinned down because of the condition she was found in.
Precisely. It creates a real challenge from the start.
Before we dig deeper into the discovery itself, the sources give us some really important background on Jenny's life. What did her family share about her?
Yeah, they did. Her sister, Sheree Thomas, she described Jenny as, well, a fighter right from birth. She was born really premature, like 3 months early.
Wow.
And she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. That affected her muscle control, gave her a pretty significant limp her whole life.
And the sources suggest that physical difference, it led to some really tough times for her growing up. Bullying in Brigham City, finding it hard to make close friends.
Yeah, it sounds like those experiences really shaped things for her. But, despite all that, her sister also painted this picture of someone with an incredibly upbeat personality. Someone whose smile could light up a room. And she was fiercely loyal. Would do anything for a friend, is how her sister put it.
It sounds like someone with a really big heart, maybe, really wanting that connection and acceptance. Her sister even wonders in the sources if that deep desire to belong might have been a bit of a downfall sometimes, maybe led her to fall in with, quote, the wrong group, especially after facing that kind of social difficulty.
That makes sense. That longing for connection, particularly when you faced rejection, it can definitely make a person vulnerable. Later on, Jenny became a mom herself to her son, Jace. And the sources are honest. They mentioned she did struggle with drug use for a period.
But she took a huge step to deal with that, didn't she? Went into rehab down in Las Vegas.
She did. And importantly, she successfully completed the program.
That's huge.
Yeah, she came back to Brigham City, really determined, it seems. The sources say she was actively trying to build a stable life, even enrolled at Bridgerland Technology College.
Okay. So really trying to move forward.
Definitely. And another thing the sources emphasize is her faith. Apparently her relationship with Jesus, Scripture, that was really central to who she was.
So you paint this picture of someone who faced, really significant challenges, physical disability, social hurdles, addiction, but showed incredible resilience, actively working towards a better future for herself and her son.
Exactly, which makes her just disappearing. It's even more jarring,
Yeah. Let's go back to that timeline then, that last sighting.
Okay, so the last confirmed time anyone saw her, according to the sources, was Tuesday evening, July 17th, 2012. She dropped off Jace, her son, who was 12 at the time, for a sleepover in Brigham City.
Okay. Standard parent stuff.
Right. And the plan was simple. She was supposed to pick him up the next morning, Wednesday the 18th.
But she never showed up.
Never showed. And naturally, the family started getting worried. Calls weren't answered, texts went unreturned over the next few days. This just wasn't like her.
So they knew something was wrong.
Yeah, they felt it. After several days with absolutely no word, her father, Arthur Atkinson, he went to the Brigham City police and officially reported her missing. That was on July 23rd.
So again, that 6-day window. Tuesday evening last seen, the following Monday reported missing. That's a critical gap, isn't it? Just a total blank in the sources about where she was or what happened to her during that time.
A complete blank. A critical unknown.
Which then brings us forward to that awful discovery nearly 3 weeks after she vanished, August 10th.
Yes. Her body was found by some kids, actually. They were camping and hiking near the Dog Flat campground in Mantua.
And the sources mention this wasn't like a completely random spot. It was an area she and her family actually knew.
That's right. They were familiar with it from earlier in her life, which adds another layer, maybe.
And identification was only possible because of the tattoo, you said.
Yes. Despite the decomposition, that very specific tattoo, praying hands, Jace Anthony, confirmed it was her. The location itself where she was found was really difficult terrain. A steep ravine, kind of inaccessible. They needed a specialized search and rescue team just to retrieve her body.
Okay, so found in a remote, tough-to-reach spot. And this leads right into the things that immediately set off alarm bells for her family, according to the sources.
Exactly, because there was another piece to this puzzle. Jenny's car, her Navy Toyota Scion, was found several hundred yards away from where her body was located down in that ravine.
Right, and the family just didn't buy it. They were immediately skeptical about her driving there and ending up in the ravine.
Very skeptical. Her dad, Art Atkinson, he's quoted, pointing out the roads getting into that specific area, especially the last bit, were very ruddy, really rough. He called her car a little Xbox car, basically saying it was totally unsuitable for that kind of terrain. No way she'd drive it up there, in his view.
So that's one piece, the car and the road, that just felt wrong to them. But maybe even more significantly, based on what they share in the sources, was where her body was found relative to Jenny's own physical abilities.
Yes, this was huge for them. They knew her limitations intimately. They felt absolutely certain that her cerebral palsy, the significant limp it caused, it would have made it physically impossible for her to get down into that steep, dangerous ravine on her own.
They just couldn't see how she could have navigated that terrain.
No way. So for the family, these inconsistencies just screamed foul play. The car's location, the unsuitable roads, and her body being found in a place that they were convinced she couldn't physically reach by herself. It just didn't add up to an accident in their minds. Not at all.
And yet, the official investigation, as the sources detail, ran into those major roadblocks we mentioned. The Box Elder County Sheriff's Office was handling it.
Yeah, and the biggest hurdle, like we said, was the condition of her body. The official statement from the Utah BCI, that's the Bureau of Criminal Identification, it noted no obvious signs of foul play. Right there, the immediate scene.
Okay, no obvious signs at the scene.
But crucially, they also stated the official cause of death could not be determined due to advanced decomposition.
Right. So that official sort of ambiguity about how she died, it stands in really sharp contrast to what her family felt, doesn't it? Based on the circumstances, based on knowing Jenny, they were convinced it was foul play. Her dad, Art, was quoted saying, something fishy, something suspicious. I don't think it was an accident.
Exactly. There's a real disconnect there between the official findings, limited as they were, and the family's gut feeling based on the whole picture.
Have the authorities said much since?
They've stated the case has been worked extensively, but they also readily admit that questions still remain. And that decomposition issue wasn't just about cause of death. It almost certainly destroyed potential trace evidence, too.
Ah, right. Things like fibers, DNA.
Exactly. Any physical clues, biological material that might have pointed to what happened or implicated someone else, likely lost to time and the elements.
So without that clear forensic proof of homicide, the path to justice gets way harder. It really hinges on finding other kinds of evidence, maybe witnesses finally coming forward or some other kind of breakthrough later on.
Makes it incredibly complex, yeah.
And so now, over a decade later, it's officially an unsolved homicide, a cold case.
That's the status. And it reflects all those challenges we've talked about.
Yep.
The decomposition obscuring the cause, no clear forensic signs at the scene, the remote location, and the fact that, publicly at least, no direct evidence or witnesses have surfaced to explain how she got there or what happened.
But the sources are clear that people haven't entirely given up. Efforts are still being made, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Groups like Project Gold Case, they featured her story back in 2022. The whole point is to raise awareness, keep her name out there, keep the case visible, hoping it might just jog someone's memory or conscience.
And the Utah BCI, they still have her case active on their cold case website.
They do. Her details are there. Contact info is listed. They're still asking for tips.
Let's mention those numbers again. The Box Elder County Sheriff is 435-734-3800. And the Utah DPS Cold Case Tip Hotline is 833-DPS-SAFE-A. That's 833-377-7233.
And it's worth remembering, cold case just means there aren't active leads right now. It doesn't mean the case is closed forever, files stay open. There's always that possibility that new information could come to light maybe years down the road. Someone's situation changes, maybe an allegiance shifts.
Right. So the hope is still there, even if it feels distant. The lack of recent news obviously reinforces that cold label, but seeing it listed, knowing the family is still fighting, it shows it's definitely not forgotten.
Which brings us to probably the most painful part of this whole story. The ongoing impact on her family.
Yeah, the sources really convey just how devastating this has been. Her sister, Cherie, described how Jenny's death just tore apart their family, created deep pain, even affected relationships within the family.
You can almost feel their anguish, especially in those early weeks. After she disappeared, but before they found her body. Her dad talking about how much they missed her, describing her as a happy person with a good sense of humor, even before they knew the awful truth.
And Cherie Thomas, her sister, she's really stepped up as an advocate, hasn't she? Using things like annual Facebook posts specifically to keep her sister's case alive, keep fighting for justice.
Yeah, and that kind of advocacy by families, it's unfortunately pretty common in these cold cases.
Yeah.
But it's such a heavy burden. They're dealing with their own intense grief, but also trying to push against, the system, the passage of time, the way public attention fades.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Totally. And their absolute conviction, which comes through so clearly in the sources that this wasn't an accident, that it had to be foul play. That's clearly what keeps them going. That drive for answers, for accountability, fuels this long, painful search.
It's really a testament to their love for her, isn't it? And just this unwavering hope that the truth will eventually come out.
It really is.
So when we step back and look at everything the sources present about Jenny Atkinson's case, the central mystery is still just sitting there. How did she, given her known physical limitations, end up in that incredibly difficult ravine, especially with her car found somewhere else entirely?
Right. And what actually happened to her? What were the circumstances of her death that were tragically obscured by the decomposition?
And you really see that gap, that chasm we talked about, between the official findings, undetermined cause, no obvious signs of foul play at the scene, and the family's absolute certainty, based on knowing Jenny and the situation, that she was murdered.
It's a stark contrast.
And it reminds you that for the people who loved her, this case isn't cold at all. It's a constantly open wound. It's this ongoing fight to make sure her story isn't forgotten before they get justice.
Yeah. And it makes you think, doesn't it, that even some tiny piece of information, something someone saw or heard back then that they dismissed as unimportant, it could be the one thing needed to finally unlock this.
The fight for answers for Jenny Atkinson definitely continues.
Yeah.
So this has been our deep dive into the sources surrounding the unsolved death of Jenny Atkinson.
It's a really difficult case. And it highlights that tension, doesn't it, between what forensics science can tell us, especially when it's limited, and the power of circumstantial evidence, combined with the deep instincts and knowledge of the people who knew the victim best.
It really does. And it leaves you thinking about, what's the ongoing role for all of us? For public memory, for continued advocacy, in trying to find justice in cold cases like this one, years after the initial investigation seems to have slowed.
What's our collective responsibility, maybe, in remembering these stories, keeping them alive, holding out hope for that breakthrough?
It's definitely something to consider. And that brings us to the end of this deep dive into the material for today.